And we stay in the United States now. It's less than 4 months until the midterm elections, where President Donald Trump's Republicans are fighting to keep their narrow majorities in both houses of Congress. For Democrats, flipping the Senate was seen as an uphill battle, and it got harder last week after a promising candidate dropped out of the race due to a sexual assault allegation. Well, Democrats are now working on nominating a new candidate in the state of Maine.
In Maine, Democrats have just a few weeks to turn disaster into opportunity. The scandal-plagued campaign of Graham Platner, once heralded as an incoming hero of a progressive Democrat revolution in Maine, is over. With Platner out, the race to replace him is on. And so is the fundamental question of where the Democrats should move to be able to beat Trump's Republicans.
Crazy. It's crazy. It's reminiscent of the Kamala Harris transition thing, picking a new candidate late in the game.
That the chaos may turn off voters in Maine and hurt a future Democratic Senate candidate's prospects is one thing. But there's also concern over the Democratic Party's chances to gain control of the Senate after the midterms, because a lot depends on Maine.
A lot of these people who are really rabid Platner supporters end up being angered by this and decide to stay home in November. That could be a problem for the Democrats, for sure.
Right now, Republicans hold the Senate by a narrow margin, 53 seats to 47. To flip control, Democrats need to pick up 4 more seats, so defending 4 seats of their own while also flipping 4 Republican-held ones. Of those 4, Maine is considered the easiest win, because Susan Collins is the only Republican senator representing a state that Kamala Harris carried in 2024. But this is a story that goes beyond Maine. Rather, it's turned into a case study of how the wider party can give voters what they want, balancing the desire for a non-establishment figure to shake things up with the dangers of putting forward an unknown quantity.
The current era in American politics is marked by pretty high levels of frustration among a lot of voters on both sides, right? I think that frustration came to a boil first among Republicans in 2015 and 2016. And so they turned to an aggressive outsider type candidate who said, I'm going to go in there and shake things up and break some stuff. Democrats now, I think, are there too.
As such, the sentiments of these Democrat Maine voters reflect a broader mood.
People were really ready for fresh ideas and fresh approaches and conviction in what we need moving forward and bringing more people to the table.
I think we're tired of seeing this country be run by the elite, and we have working class families here in Maine that want to be fairly represented.
Get more young people in it, not a bunch of 67-year-olds that are still kind of stuck in their time.
Economic populists have been gaining ground across the country, from Zoran Mamdani's mayoral win in New York to Milat Kiros unseating a nearly 3-decade incumbent in Colorado, to Chris Rob's primary win in Pennsylvania. Whether Democrats take the Platner saga as motivation to vet their insurgent outsiders more carefully, or as a reason to cling to more establishment figures, remains a live question. But Maddie Daughtry of the Maine Senate Democrats says she feels the party has to be able to accommodate the full spectrum of views.
I have folks who are more moderate. I have folks who are even further left than I am. And I am able to sort of sit down with them and, as a family, as a caucus, argue these ideas out. Having your ideas challenged within the same caucus or party infrastructure is what makes us better able to meet the moment.
And to Mark Brewer, listening to Democrat voters when they say they're tired of the status quo is important, but cautions. While a burn it all down message might get someone elected, it can become a problem once they're actually in office.
I think the underlying motivating anger is the same on both sides right now. And how well the Democrats are able to harness that, I think, is still to be determined.
Maine Democrats are also taking lessons from the national level, designing the replacement process for Platner in a way that would make it hard to criticize them for simply anointing a candidate, a perception that followed Kamala Harris's candidacy in 2024, after Joe Biden withdrew from the presidential race. Rather, they've chosen county-level delegates choosing a nominee at a mini-convention. For Daughtry, that structure reflects a deeper principle. The party, not only one candidate, has to be the thing that voters trust.
We can't put politicians on pedestals. We should hold them accountable. But I want to remind everybody that a movement is bigger than one leader. If it ever is completely dependent on one person or one cult of personality, we're in trouble. There is no magical candidate who's going to save us. It's about all of us deciding what our values is as a society.
One Senate seat is at stake in Maine, but for Democrats nationally, so is an answer as to who they want to be.
And that was my colleague Janelle Dumoulin filing that report. We're joined now by Frank Sesno, media expert and political analyst. He's joining us from George Washington University. Welcome to you. We've heard there that Democrats are facing this deadline now to replace Graham Platner after his U.S. Senate campaign imploded amid sexual assault allegations. How difficult will it be to find a candidate who can successfully take on the Republicans in the state, especially at this late stage now?
Well, it's very late in the game. And as we heard in that report, the party's trying very hard to be as transparent as possible so it doesn't look like some, coronation the way it looked like when Joe Biden indicated that Kamala Harris should be the presidential nominee when we went through this last time. What's happening, though, is that it's a real scramble with so little time. Where are Platner's voters going to go? Are they going to have confidence in the system? Do they splinter among the different progressive candidates? How progressive is the successor versus how moderate is that successor, given the big range of candidates? Some of them are well-known. They've been in the state legislature. Some of them are barely known. So there's a lot at stake here. I think they have a pretty decent shot, though, because of the convention process and because it's a relatively small state in terms of population and well followed. But it's not easy, and it's very late.
And we also have, to add to this, now this fatal ICE shooting in the state, which is raising the stakes. There have been protests calling for federal immigration agents to get out of the state. How big of an issue do you think this will now be, immigration policy in the midterm elections in Maine and beyond?
Well, in Maine, it's a huge issue. It may be a defining or redefining issue. So several of the candidates vying for Platner's position who want to get the Democratic nod from the convention were together side by side at a protest over the shooting that you're showing here. This is what they're now talking about. This is what they're now using against Susan Collins, the Republican who's defending this seat. This is a defining issue. Maine is a big state geographically, but a small state in terms of feeling like you're in a community. People know one another. People feel they know one another. A shooting like this in a state like this is personal, and it has had an outsized impact on the debate and conversation since it happened. And the candidates who are scrambling to get the Democratic nod are grabbing onto this. Some are calling for the defunding of ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, saying that Susan Collins, the Republican incumbent, funded them and trying to hang this around her neck. So this is going to be is already and going to continue to be a very big one in the state of Maine.
The dynamics, in this Senate race in Maine have made such big headlines. But I'd like you to also give us a sense of the national picture right now. What does the race in Maine tell us about Democrats' broader path to gaining seats in Congress?
It tells us a number of things. It's a great question. On the one hand, it's the battle between the hard left progressive part of the party that wants the elite gone. They want change. They are completely distrustful of the system, and more moderates who say, hey, if we want centrist voters to show up and vote for us on election day, we can't be off on the left. So there's that push me, pull you. Secondly, there is the sort of upwelling, and this is where we see some of the numbers out there for about Donald Trump. He has got very low job approval rating numbers in the United States right now. And in Maine, which is a state he lost against Kamala Harris, that's particularly true. So how does national politics stamp and map onto local and statewide politics? That's another one. And the state of Maine is also going to be feeling very clearly, a map you put up earlier, it's one of a handful of states that it could actually tip the balance in the United States Senate. And that is a very big deal. So the connection now between statewide, local politics and national politics is direct and consequential. And what I'm seeing in this election cycle, more than I've seen in others, is that people on both sides, because we're so divided right now in this country, really feel that. And so it adds to the passion. the bottom at the end of the day, the bottom line question is who shows up to vote, right? Who produces the turnout that's going to be necessary, because this will be a close one.
Frank Sesno joining us from George Washington University. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, I want to pull in now Julius von der Laar. He's a political strategist and campaign advisor here in Germany. He also worked on Barack Obama's winning presidential campaigns in 2008, 2012. Julius, good to see you on this Wednesday evening. So, look into your crystal ball. 4 months out, how realistic is a Democratic Senate takeover today?
I mean, the odds look great. There's great enthusiasm on the Democratic side nationwide. And of course, there's a movement that was being built around Graham Platner. Now, of course, with him dropping out, they got to replace him with another candidate. The mechanics are relatively easy. The politics are brutal. So it's going to be the Hunger Games when it comes to the Democratic Convention in 10 days from now. And I think Democrats have their work cut out to rebuild a campaign and then, of course, move forward with that nominee until November 3rd.
You know, the setback in Maine, we have to say, it is significant. Is losing a candidate this late, is it just a local problem, or can it affect the national battle for the Senate?
I mean, it certainly is a national story, and it gives Republicans, of course, a cover too, to say, well, you know, we're not the only party that's imperfect and it's got scandals. The Democrats are just basically just like us. They have their own problems. So it shifts the perspective and, of course, shifts the attention away from a referendum over Donald Trump and the Republicans and the horrible numbers that Donald Trump and the Republicans have over towards the Democrats. So that is a big issue. I think for Democrats, there's a lesson to be learned from the last 2024 election. And Brent, we often talked about how Kamala Harris all of a sudden had 107 days left to rebuild a campaign. And that is basically what Democrats have to do in Maine to pick up that seat that is so necessary for them to have a shot at retaking control over the Senate.
That's a very good point. It was just a year ago we were talking about that, you know, not having much time to prepare. Republicans now, we know, hold only narrow majorities. And in a typical midterm year, you know, that would make them vulnerable. Does Donald Trump, though, does he change the usual rules?
I mean, we've seen over and over again that when Donald Trump is on the ballot, turnout for Republicans is tremendous. Now, Donald Trump, of course, is not on the ballot. And again, when I look at his numbers, there's around 58% who disapprove of the president. When you look at the economic numbers, people are unhappy. When you look at the direction of the country, people are saying it's headed in the wrong direction. So basically, people are saying we're unsatisfied. And Republicans are controlling the Senate, the House of Representatives, and of course, the White House. So they're basically responsible. It is a referendum over the status quo. And if the numbers are this bad, there have only been 2 exceptions in 70 years where the party in power has not lost control. So basically what I'm saying is Republicans are up for a shellacking, just like Democrats have experienced in the past under Barack Obama and, of course, under Joe Biden as well. So they should lose this election.
You know, 2 years ago, with Kamala Harris, we were talking about the Democrats campaigning against Donald Trump. We were saying the same thing when it was Joe Biden. Is opposition to Trump, is it still enough to motivate voters in 2026 to give Republicans that shellacking you're talking about?
Well, I think frustration is high, and we've seen in special election after special election and gubernatorial elections all across the country that turnout is tremendous and that Democrats are winning. So that should be a good indicator for Democrats. However, we talked about the Senate. Democrats have a tough road ahead. They have to have a net pickup of 4 seats to regain control over the Senate. And I think they have their work cut out, especially now with Graham Platner out and Susan Collins, who has been winning those seats for over almost 2 decades, I should say. That is going to be a tough order for them to measure up to.
You worked on Barack Obama's campaigns. What are today's Democrats maybe missing that Obama's team understood about winning elections?
Well, I think back in 2008, people were frustrated with the status quo. And Obama came in to promise hope and change and a new path forward. Right now, Democrats, I would argue, have the change aspect on their side. People are sick and tired of the politics as they are right now. But Democrats have the issue that they are having a hard time to figure out what the optimistic message about the future is. Bill Clinton would always say back in 1998, elections are about the future, not about the past. And I think Democrats right now are caught up talking about the status quo, about Donald Trump, the scandals, about everything that is going wrong in this country. But they haven't answered the question of how they would change it towards a better future. And I think that is the big question, whether they're able to figure it out until November 3rd, and then, of course, moving forward to the 2028 presidential race.
Joseph, I've got 30 seconds. Let me ask you, if Democrats fail to win back the Senate, should they stop blaming Trump and start blaming themselves?
I think that is the usual reaction for Democrats. Republicans, of course, are completely different in that sense. They have scandal after scandal. You just need to look at the race down in Texas where Ken Paxton has similar scandals, just like Graham Platner, but they're sticking with their candidates. They're never moving away. Sexual scandals, never a problem for Republicans. Just think about the 2024 election with Donald Trump. They never shied away from supporting their candidates. And so I think the big question is, how pragmatic should Democrats be in order to focus on taking power and not so much focusing on the individual that's in the race.
Julius van der Laar, as always, Julius, good to see you. Good to get your insights on this as well. Thank you.
Thank you.